Good morning, everybody. Today is April 18th, 2022. Welcome to the class BMN 504, Foundations of Buddhist Thought. Today is the third session. I hope all of you are doing okay. So last week we were talking about the karma and rebirth, one of the core teachings of Buddhism, rebirth and karma. Remember that in Buddhism, we do not talk about reincarnation. We talk about rebirth. So there's a difference between rebirth and reincarnation. Last week I mentioned about it and focus on that thing. Today, we move on to the next subject, next topic. As today's assigned topic is, Four Noble Truths. Maybe in your previous classes or in your readings or somehow you must have come across this term, Four Noble Truths. In Buddhism, this is one of the, again, one of the core main teachings. Four Noble Truths. Truth is one. Usually it says truth is one. But in Buddhist teaching, it is categorized as four types of truths or four kinds of truth. The approach is very scientific here. Buddhism accepts that the basic problem for in any religion you find this thing. Any religion is focusing on one main problem faced by human beings. Maybe it is original sin. Original sin or samsara or something like that. But in Buddhism, if you want to find the basic problem that Buddhism trying to solve is, it is called suffering. When I use the word suffering, be careful. Suffering means actually a dissatisfaction in our life. Now you can figure this out when you talk about the life story of the Buddha. He left the Siddhartha Gautama or the Buddha. He left the palace. He left his luxurious life. We use a technical term for that. He renounced the family life, renouncing the family life. He renounced the family life to find a lasting solution for the dissatisfaction. Even though he had all kinds of luxuries and things, he was not satisfied. So he wanted to find a lasting solution for the problem, dissatisfaction or suffering. So in Buddhism, after the Buddha attained the enlightenment at the age of 35 onwards up until he was 80, 45 long years, all his teachings are based on this thing, how to understand suffering and how to eradicate suffering, and what method, what type of things that we have to do to get rid of suffering in our life. This is the main task of the Buddha. So in that sense, you can say this is the most important teaching in Buddhism. Four Noble Truths. Four Noble Truths, the scientific approach, as I told you, is this. Now, in any given situation, any given problem in our life, or in anywhere, first thing is we have to understand that there is a problem. That is the scientific method. If you are sick, if you are having any medical issue or any problem, first thing is to diagnose it. Understand what the problem is. So in Buddhism, when we talk about the Four Noble Truths, the very first thing is to understand, to realize the problem, diagnosis, right? That is the first one. And in Buddhist terms, it is mentioned like dukkha. Dukkha means the problem, suffering, dissatisfaction. That is the problem. So you have to understand that first. And then, as a doctor does, this is like a doctor's task, medicine. When you diagnose somebody for some problem, some medical thing, then you have to look for the cause for the problem. The second step is the cause for the problem. Say, for instance, now you have a water leak in your house. The problem is water is leaking. You see it. And then, if you are a good plumber, the second step is, why does this water leaking here? Why? What is the cause? The reason behind this thing. In the same way, in Buddhism, when these noble truths are presented, it is presented in that manner. First thing is to understand the problem. Second step is to explain or find the cause. Maybe a single cause, or maybe many causes, many reasons. So second step is the cause of suffering. Let's put it in the way that it is mentioned in the books. Suffering, cause of suffering, the second noble truth. And the third one, just like a doctor finds a solution, a treatment for the diagnosis, for the problem, the solution, maybe some medicine. Oh, this is the solution. Just like the plumber, he sees that he sees the cause of the leak, and then he decides, this is the solution for this. This is how I'm going to fix it. The fixing. In Buddhism, according to the Four Noble Truths are presented, it's called suffering, the cause of suffering, the solution. Solution means, according to the Buddhist teaching, it is presented like, so now suffering is there, the cause of suffering is called the desire. You become dissatisfied because you have too much desire. We get dissatisfied, we get suffering because of our desire. So the solution then is to eradicate or get rid of desire, to uproot the desire, and then that is the solution, that is the treatment, that is the medicine. And then how to do it? The last step is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. Cessation means stopping. What is the way? What is the path leading to the cessation of suffering? Like a doctor knows the medicine, but then there is a method of taking it. How to take that medicine? One in the morning tablet, one in the evening, or with meals or whatever. In the same way, in Buddhism, the last step is path leading to the cessation of suffering. So these are the 4 steps or the 4 noble truths in Buddhism. Suffering, cause of suffering, a release or the solution, freedom from suffering, and the last one is the path leading to the freedom or cessation of suffering. These are the 4 noble truths. So this is, as I told you, this is the most important teaching in Buddhism. As all the other religions also talk about one big issue faced with human beings, and they are trying to find a solution for that. So in Buddhism, this is the big problem, and Buddhism is trying to solve this issue and prescribe a method of attaining that solution, reaching that solution. So very logical. The order is very logical, right? Diagnosis, the cause of the issue, and then solution, and how to achieve that solution, how to reach that solution. So this way, 4 noble truths are, you can easily name them, but there are many issues and analysis on this thing. So now, in after Buddha attained enlightenment, he gave his first preaching or his first sermon to the 5 ascetics, right? You know these things. And in that discourse, in that teaching, Buddha explains how we suffer, or what is dissatisfaction, what dissatisfaction is, and understanding that thing will be the first step. So in our practical life also, you can apply this thing if you are faced with a big issue in your life. Sometimes we have to face things like that. So when you are pressed with some big issue, very first thing that you need to do is to understand that I have a problem. Acceptance. I have a problem. So, in other words, according to Buddhist terms, I am suffering. I have dissatisfaction. Something like that. So in the very first sermon, the Buddha explains what suffering is. He says, suffering is like this. When we are disgusted with somebody, something, not to receive what one wants, if I don't receive what I need, then dissatisfaction, suffering. First thing is the very birth is suffering. This might be problematic for you. Birth is suffering. Birth is suffering for whom? If I am born, that is, suffering is born. Because I'm here, suffering is here. with me. Maybe your birth might not be a suffering for your parents. In a way, yes. But the psychological meaning is that if you are born again and again, that means suffering continues. You might think that after passing, after dying here in this life, suffering will be over. No, you will be reborn. Last week we were talking about the rebirth. So you will be reborn. That means again, the conditions are getting together for suffering again. in this way, so jatipi in the Pali, jatipi dukkha means birth is suffering. And then sickness is suffering. When you get sick, of course, suffering. Getting old, when you grow old, suffering. Because you want to do things the way you did before, but you cannot, then dissatisfaction, suffering. Death is, of course, suffering. Jatipi dukkha, jarapi dukkha, vyadipi dukkha, maranampi dukkha. So these four things: birth, getting old, getting sick, and death. All these are suffering. And then when you associate with unwanted things, when we have the when we get to mingle with unwanted people and unwanted things, unwanted situations, you are dissatisfied. That is suffering. And also the other thing is, the other aspect is, when there is separation from the wanted things, when you separate from your loved ones, when loved ones leave you, again suffering. Psychologically, you feel a loss, dissatisfaction. And you are wishing for something, you really want to achieve something, and you cannot do it, then suffering. At the end, the Buddha says in that sutra, in that discourse, the very clinging to your five skandhas. Five skandhas means clinging to this everything, your body, your mind, and all, everything, your needs and your feelings. Clinging on to these things is suffering. If you have clinging, that word is very important. If you have clinging or desire or attachment to your being, when I say your being, it means you are made of feelings, sensations, consciousness. As long as you are attached to those things, suffering will follow. So now you should be able to understand how Buddhism analyzes this issue. There is the problem. Problem is that suffering, and what type of suffering is that? What type of dissatisfaction is that? It is explained like the way that I did now. Everything in our life is suffering. It looks like we have pleasure and joy and happiness, but the problem is we cannot retain it. We cannot keep it for a long time. Maybe you work hard for long years, many years perhaps, to reach to a certain level, to buy a house, to buy a new car or any other thing, to land on a new profession. And as soon as you reach that level, you get happiness. You get a satisfaction, right? But the issue is then you cannot keep it for a long time. You cannot retain it for a long time. That is suffering. That is where suffering starts. So the Buddha does not say that when you enjoy something, when you reach some status, there is satisfaction, there is happiness. The problem is we cannot maintain it. You cannot keep it for a long time. Things change. So the cause of suffering, suffering is there because things are changing, transitory, cannot keep the same way. By looking at your own life, you can see this thing. When you get sick, because when you are young, when we are young, we are happy, satisfied. But as we grow old, you cannot function the way that you did. So then dissatisfaction arises. Just giving you an example. So in all our lives, this is what is happening. Dissatisfaction is surrounded by, we are surrounded by dissatisfaction. No matter whether it's pleasant thing or unpleasant thing, in the final analysis, it is dissatisfaction or suffering. And then when the Buddha goes on to the second step, second noble truth is, what is the cause for this situation, this problem, suffering? According to Buddhist understanding, all these things happen because of our desire. That's the term used in Buddhism, desire, the English translation. The real Pali term is tanha or trishna in Sanskrit. Tanha means desire or attachment, clinging, in other words. Desire is good translation. We have a desire for many things, right? Desire for our own being and desire for things, desire to have good relationships, keep them as we want them, desire to be mingled with pleasant things, desire to be away from unwanted, miserable things, like that. Our desire, that causes us to suffer. Now, the second step is very important, understanding the cause of suffering. Because of desire, so you have to, if you are following Buddhism, the very first thing is understand the problem. The second one is, okay, the cause for my suffering is this. Suffering that I have. Suffering is like in our lives, in different situations, suffering comes into being and we get devastated because of suffering. That is the second step. And then the third one is, okay, now if suffering is there, then the solution for this big problem is to be away from suffering or get rid of suffering. And in Buddhism, it is termed as freedom from suffering, or the famous word Nirvana. That is the medicine. if you can achieve nirvana, if you can attain nirvana, then you are saying goodbye to desire. So this is something that you have to do in you. Nobody else brings it to you. Nobody else bringing you nirvana. That's our own task. We have to do it. We have to get rid of our desire, and then the solution, the freedom from desire or nirvana will be there. It's not coming from outside, it is inside. It's a psychological thing happening inside you. When you are out of desire, right there you find the freedom from suffering. That is the third one. So nirvana, we will be talking about it in great detail, but here we understand as one step of the four noble truths, as the solution for the big issue, suffering, is nirvana, attaining that peace and freedom from the suffering, peace. And then the last one is, how do we attain nirvana? What type of activity that we have to follow? What is the technique? What is the path we have to follow to attain freedom from suffering? And it is called the Eighth Noble Path, Noble Eightfold Path. Noble Eightfold Path is the path that leads you to the state of non-suffering or freedom from suffering. That will also be one of the teachings, and we will be discussing it, I hope, next week. Noble Eightfold Path. Today I'm just introducing the term and the structure of the teaching. Now go back and see how this is framed. The very first truth is the suffering. Second one is the cause of suffering. Third one is the freedom from suffering, or you want to use the word nirvana. And then path leading to the cessation of suffering. Now you find the word noble in here. The first noble truth is suffering. Now you may wonder why suffering is noble. You know the meaning of the word noble. Noble means higher, great, that kind of idea. So suffering is great, suffering is noble. How come? Something to think about, huh? Why suffering is noble? Because it has a big meaning. It is noble because in many ways, in Buddhism, this is explained in many ways. First thing is, it is noble because this has been discovered by a noble person. Noble person. That is one explanation. But I like this explanation. It is noble because suffering has a value, very big value. It is because of suffering. Because there is suffering, only you can be away from suffering. That's why it's noble. It's like it has a recycling value. That is the word, recycling value. Suffering is the thing that you transform into freedom or nibbana. Understand in that way. Just like, out there in the garden, what you may call the garden debris, leaves and unwanted things, garden debris. If you are a good gardener, what you do is you collect those garden debris into one place and allow it to, get rotten, or what do you call the, you make it compost, garden debris, sometimes very unpleasant things, but you turn them, you transform them into a manure, fertilizer, right? And then you apply those unwanted things to plants, trees. What happens is that very same unwanted things, debris, will transform into beautiful flowers and beautiful fruits. Suffering is just like that. It is because of suffering, availability of suffering makes you to go forward to find a solution for that problem. If there is no suffering, then you don't have to do anything. Because there is suffering, you go forward to find a solution. And in that sense, suffering is noble. Because suffering is noble, you go forward to find the solution. In that sense, suffering is noble. So that's why it's called noble truth, higher truth. Okay. And the other things, other steps are also identified as noble, because that is the only thing that you have to do, understanding this cause of suffering and the freedom from suffering, the path leading to the cessation of suffering. All these four things are categorized in Buddhism, explained in great detail in Buddha's lifetime. He gave many discourses on these things in many different ways. Somebody might say that this is the whole Buddhist teachings. So that is Four Noble Truths. So now we end up with that introduction, and now your homework will be to read the book in the chapter that you find in your textbook about suffering and the Four Noble Truths. And I will email you the homework for this week. You have to do some work on this. If you have any question, please email me and ask me. If you find something difficult to understand, or if you want to elaborate certain things, always there is option. Email me and ask. So that is it for today. Yes, thank you very much. See you next week.